Good afternoon, everybody. It's 12:01. We'd like to welcome you all to our webinar, Promoting Student Interaction and Engagement in Remote Learning. My name is Jasmine Parent. I'm a Learning Technology Consultant at TLS. I'm here today with a colleague who will be co-hosting the webinar with me, Erin McDonough, who is a Teaching and Learning Planner at TLS. So just some housekeeping notes. We want to let you know that this session is being recorded and the recording will be posted on our website. We'd like to note that you are muted upon entry. We ask that you hold off with questions while we present. We will be setting aside some time at the end of the webinar to address some of your questions. And finally, one more point, I'd like to let you know that the slides for this webinar are posted on our website as well. So let's get started. We're going to start by going over the goals we have for this webinar. So our goal for today's webinar is to define what engagement and interaction mean in the context of remote teaching and learning. We will be also identifying technologies and strategies you can use to include fixed and flexible activities to promote engagement in your course. So first, let's define what we mean when we say engagement and interaction. So the concept of engagement and interaction in education is a multidimensional one. Before giving you strategies on how to increase your engagement, we think it's important that you realize that there are different modes of engagement and interaction when it comes to education. So interaction can occur through students engaging with your course content. It can also occur between students, and it can occur between the instructor, yourself, and your students. Something to keep in mind, sorry, my slide didn't go ahead here. There we go. Something to keep in mind in a remote learning environment is that instructors and students' peers can sometimes seem like these mystical figures that only exist behind the screen. So in this type of environment, students don't have that physical connection to the university. Their connection that they have to it is through you and through other students. And that often is the main connection they have to the institution. So because of this, it's really important to foster some sort of rapport with your students and give them opportunities to connect with each other. So creating a sense of community is essential to learning, but especially in a remote learning environment. It's important to be very intentional with how you design strategies to increase engagement and that those strategies align with your learning outcomes. This will help your students achieve a more deep and meaningful learning experience. In the following slides, we're going to present you with ideas and strategies on how you can promote engagement and ultimately create that deeper type of learning experience in a remote environment. So I'm going to pass the next section on to my colleague, Erin. Erin, take it away.
I thought I unmuted myself. Sorry, there's a little example of one good Zoom practice. Make sure you're unmuted before you start speaking. So thanks again, Jasmine. My name is Erin McDonough, and I'm Teaching and Learning Planner at Teaching and Learning Services. And I'm going to be talking to you briefly about fixed and flexible activities. So for those of you who attended the earlier webinar on planning for remote delivery, these two terms probably seem familiar to you. And we use them to describe remote teaching activities and interactions that take place in two different ways. So briefly put, fixed interactions are fixed in time. Students and instructors engage in an activity together in a shared virtual space at a single time. So by and large, most of these activities will take place using Zoom, like we're doing right now. And I'm going to get into some specific ways that you can use Zoom to engage your students in just a moment. And on the other side, we have flexible interaction strategies. And these are designed to be accessible to students to access at different times. So there's no live component. Choosing the interactions that fit each type of delivery is really up to you. And you should base it on your course content and learning outcomes that you have set in your course. And I do want to kind of emphasize that there is some mutability and some complementarity between the two. For instance, you could do a live class using Zoom, record it, and then put it onto My Courses. So it becomes accessible in a flexible way. Students can go in and view it at their leisure. So all of this is to say that we want to encourage you to think of your course as featuring both fixed and flexible interactions. And that's for reasons of access and to accommodate students who are maybe in different time zones and a host of different reasons. So if we go on to the next slide, I'm going to speak briefly about fixed activities that you can integrate into your live Zoom sessions. So going on to the next slide, we thought it might be useful to you to see an example of how you might section up a course that you're delivering in a live way. So this is an example we've pulled from the University of Minnesota. It's about a 50-minute session where you can see that there are different time periods that are allotted to different types of activities, and it alternates between outreach strategies to your students and the delivery of content. So it starts right off with a whiteboarding activity. This might take the form of when your students enter the virtual space, you share your screen and start up a whiteboard right away and ask them to respond to a question. And I should maybe just take a second to tell you that I actually like most of my work at TLS is around physical spaces. So I think of this as being analogous to how you would coordinate and offer an in-person class. So you have your students come into the room and you pair them up and you ask them, okay, let's talk about what you know about this subject. Put up some ideas on the whiteboard. You could do something similar in a Zoom class. And then you can see the next segment of the class, you give students 2 minutes to respond to a poll. So maybe say, how would you gauge your understanding of this topic, and give some percentage values. So like, I think I have like maybe, on a scale of 1 to 100, I'm at about a 50 on this topic. And then you can do about 10 minutes with a mini lecture where you deliver some information, you turn on, you share your screen with your PowerPoint presentation, you annotate it using the annotate function in Zoom, then you go to breakout rooms with your students. So these are kind of the analog of having group work in your class. So you can send students into these virtual spaces where they can have a discussion question they can talk about, and then they come back after 10 minutes and they do a debrief. So they have one student in the group is elected as secretary, and they report back to the group as a whole what they've been discussing in their small group session, and then you go back to some sort of content delivery. So there is, like, you can see there's this alternation between content delivery and different activities that you put in place to let students talk to each other, to feel like they have some touch points with other students, to get their voices out there. So there are a lot of different ways that you can do this. This is just one example, but we'd encourage you to think of ways that you can break up the time in your class. And another reason you want to do this is just to avoid Zoom fatigue. So just the students sitting there receiving content for 50 minutes over a Zoom call can be quite tedious. And this is one way that you can maybe help to make it a little bit more interesting and engaging for them. So moving on to the next slide, I'd like to present a few examples of fixed synchronous activities that can be easily and simply adapted to your course content. And these will bring back some of the examples we saw in that University of Minnesota class time schedule. So the first is a live class instructor to student type interaction. And that will be hosted, that will be mostly over Zoom. And there are many different tools that are available to you as the meeting host, and I'll describe a few of those to you in a moment. And next, in the category of student-to-student interaction, I'll briefly go over breakout rooms. So I alluded to those just now. And again, that's using Zoom. And then I'd like to talk briefly about student-to-content interaction, and that will be using different types of polling. And there are a couple of different examples I'll present to you. So this webinar is a lot of the type, and we'll be talking a lot about the types of tools and examples of the tools that are available to you. I want to take a moment to say that there are future and recorded webinars that you can access that will give you more information on actually how to do these types of activities. So if you need more information about Zoom, we have a Leveling Up Your Zoom Skills webinar. And if you want more information about polling, there's a Polling at McGill webinar that you can attend. And so in those webinars, they'll go into more detail about how to actually do these types of activities. So just moving on to the next slide. I wanted to give you an idea of what your Zoom taskbar looks like and how you can find the tools that I'm talking about. So the first, on the left-hand side, I've highlighted the chat button. And the chat button is a really useful tool. It may or may not be practical for you, depending on how you like to teach and how easily you can ignore chat bubbles that keep popping up. But it's a good way to ask students a question in real time and get their feedback live. You can deploy it strategically at different intervals. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. So if you use the security button, you can actually turn off the chat, turn it back on. You may want to lecture for a little while, then open up the chat, have students bring up their questions. It can be used as a strategic tool. or you can turn it off entirely if you just find it too distracting. And then secondly, I want to point out the share screen button in the middle of the screen here. So this, as you probably, many of you have already used it to share your PowerPoint presentations if you're teaching the winter 2020 semester, but it's actually much more powerful than that. Right now we're using it just to share, but you can also annotate your slides, and you can use your mouse to hover over different things if you want to point things out on the slide. You can share any application from your computer. Let's say you want to show SPSS. If you want to show some other, like something on your web browser, all of these things are shareable using the share screen slide. And then, as we mentioned before, there's also a whiteboarding function that you can use, and you can set it so students can annotate the whiteboard as well, or you can have it just so you as the instructor are the only one who can annotate the whiteboard. There are many different ways that you can use this tool, and all of them very interesting. So we'd encourage you to experiment with that. And then finally, on the right-hand side, you can see the reactions button. So this is a way that instructors can prompt their students to give a quick, real-time reaction to the content. And the students using this reactions button have two options. They can give a thumbs up, or they can give like a little clapping icon. And it's visible to everybody in the call. So in all of the little picture-in-picture, like the inset pictures of everyone on the call, you'll see the little icon come up in the corner. And actually, let's just try it right now. I'll just ask you all if you could go down to your reactions button and then choose whichever one you like, and you'll see what it looks like. Yeah, so you see Adam's put his thumb up. You see a few other people are giving some reactions. Excellent. So this is visible to everybody in the call. It's just a way of maybe taking the temperature in the room. You could ask a question like, is everybody okay? Is everybody following so far? And get a quick assess. You can quickly assess what's going on with your class. All right, so we'll move on to the next slide, please. So the next type of interaction, student-to-student interaction, that I'd like to talk about breakout rooms, which is actually one of the things that Zoom really excels in providing. It's one of the best tools on the market for this, and we've looked around and we do find that it meets many of our standards for providing the type of breakout room that is really great for teaching. So it's good for group work. You can do it on the fly in your class. Let's say you notice that students seem to be really active in the chat, and you want to give them a chance to talk to one another about this. You can just hit the breakout rooms button and have students automatically sorted into rooms, and they can go out and chat about that and then come back and report back. So it can be done easily on the fly. But if you do want to kind of engineer the composition of your rooms, you can actually manually sort students into rooms. And have the type of group composition that maybe will provide the type of outcome that you want. And you can also set the composition of the groups in My Courses in advance of your class. So it can either be set, you can either create the rooms in advance, or you can do it instantaneously on the fly within a live class. There are some limits when it comes to breakout rooms. For instance, you can have up to 200 people in one of the breakout rooms, which I have to admit, I think would be probably pretty difficult to manage, but if that suits the type of activity you want to do, then I'd say go for it. And you can have up to 50 breakout rooms at once. So working within those limitations, you can do quite a bit. I'd encourage you again to experiment with this. And then moving on to the next slide. Student to content interactions. So this is polling, basically. And I've given you three options here, and they move from left to right, from the easiest and probably the least data-rich way of conducting a poll in your class, to the most sophisticated and the richest analytics that you can get back from your polling. So the first is the Zoom yes and no easy poll. And this is really easy to manage. You can ask a yes or no question in your class, and it will collect the student responses that you receive and tally them for you. A downside to it is that data is not saved, and obviously you can only ask yes or no questions. But one use case that I like to bring up is one of the advantages of it is that the students can't see the responses unless you choose to tell them what responses you're getting in. So I think that, you know, as a student, a former student, I might have been a little bit hesitant to answer the question, does everybody understand honestly? Because it can be a little bit daunting if you know that everybody sees that you do not understand. This may be one way of asking that question, getting the feedback from students, and then being able to change the course of your lecture appropriately, since students don't have to publicly reveal if they understand or not. The intermediate type of polling that I want to present today is Zoom polling. So that's available to you here in Zoom. It's easy to use. It does require a little bit of setup. You have to go into your meeting settings before your class and set up a poll, but it's pretty easy to do once you get there. And you can set up a multiple choice question. We're going to do one in a second, and so you'll see exactly what it looks like. But it is, like I said, limited to multiple choice questions. And then something we've noticed in our webinars is that when you launch one of these polls, it's not actually captured in the recording of the class or of the session. So that's just something to be aware of. So if you do want to have that information available afterward, you'd have to make other provisions for capturing it and delivering it to your students. And then lastly, we have polling at McGill. Some of you may have already been using polls in your classes, in your physical classes. It's a very rich tool. You can ask many different question types and then be able to dig into that data in a really sophisticated way afterward. But it does require quite a bit of prep on your part. It's not something that you can just decide on the fly in the middle of your class. Hey, I want to do a poll with polling at McGill. You're going to have to plan for it in advance. But the upside is that you will get better data out of it. So going on to the next slide, I'm going to try a poll here. So I'm going to launch a poll for you in just a second so you can see how this tool works. And the question I'd like you to answer is, which polling method are you most likely to use in your courses? And you'll see this question come up in a moment. I'll give you 30 seconds to answer. So here you go. So you should all see that poll on your screen now. And as the administrator, as the host of this meeting, I can actually see your answers as they come in. And I've also got a timer on my screen. So I see we're 10 seconds into the poll, 12 seconds. I can see what the leader is right now, but I'm not gonna end the suspense. I'm gonna let you see it at the end of the polling period. You have 7 seconds left to answer the question. Still some responses coming in. I've got 35 people who've answered the question, oh sorry, 34 people. And I'm going to end the poll now. So the poll is off your screen, but now I'm going to share the results so you can see how everyone has answered. And so looks like 2 or more polling methods has won the day at 56% of respondents. And that actually is in keeping with what we're seeing in a lot of our webinars, that people are really interested in polling. And I would really encourage you to go and try this out for yourself. If you're teaching in the fall semester, you have access to Zoom. You can invite a friend to a session and try this out with them, see how it works for you, but quite a bit of interactivity in your classes. I'm going to stop sharing those results now and pass it over to you, Jasmine.
Thank you, Erin. So we're going to talk about flexible interactive learning activities. There are different ways in which you can get your students to interact and engage more deeply with your content. And one way to do so is by adding quick and low stakes learning activities to the flow of your content. So we suggest adding an active learning activity between content topics. So rather than presenting long pieces of content and then giving your students knowledge checks at the end of a module only, you might want to consider staggering or alternating your content with an activity. So when I say content, I mean your course materials. So your PowerPoint slides, your readings, articles, websites, videos. The activities are interactive pieces. Having a bit of trouble here with my PowerPoint. There we go. The activities are interactive learning pieces. So activities can be self-assessment questions, quiz questions, or a survey question or discussion prompt. So short activities like these give students an opportunity to check in with their learning. It also shifts their focus from listening or reading passively to being a little more active in their learning. So you can use these types of activities as knowledge checks after you present an idea, or perhaps as a way to get them thinking about the next content topic. You can use Microsoft Teams to foster student-to-student interaction. So Microsoft Teams is available to McGill students through the Office 365 suite. Students usually have multiple platforms to organize their group work. So they might be using Google Drive, OneDrive to share their files, Skype or some form of video chat to have their virtual meetings, and then have another platform that they use for chatting or brainstorming. So rather than having them go to 5 different places to do a group project in a remote setting, they can use Teams to achieve all of these tasks. So Teams allow students to create a team. They can add their peers. They can have conversations there. There's a chat. They can upload their work and be working on files simultaneously, and they can have virtual meetings. So best of all, it's provided and supported by McGill, and so it's free for them to use. So this is a big one, discussion boards. I'm going to be mostly talking about my course's discussion boards in particular. So discussion boards are an excellent tool to promote engagement and interaction. The discussion board can be used to achieve all modes of interaction in remote learning, actually. You can have students interact with your content by using discussion boards for a place of reflection and self-assessment. So you can have question prompts that give them an opportunity to deeply reflect on what they know, what they understand, and maybe what they don't. You can also use the discussion board to have students answer topic and reading-based questions, for example. So maybe have them write a summary of a reading that you want them to do, or answer questions on the reading. I have an example here of a discussion board from a unit in the World of Chemistry course. As you can see within the Unit 2, there are multiple discussion questions about topics within that unit. So it's a way for you to also pinpoint perhaps troubled areas where you might need to make clarifications on your material depending on misconceptions that arise. You can interact with your students on the discussion board as well. So here you can see an example of a forum that uses that is used for students to ask questions to the instructor or the TA to have them potentially clarify misunderstandings or just pose more general questions about the course or the content. This can be a really great time saver for you and your TAs, especially if you're receiving frequently asked questions through email. So rather than responding to each one individually, if you're getting the same question over and over, you can address them all at once and post it on your Q&A discussion board. You can also use the discussion board to get to know your students. So at the beginning of a semester, you might want to post an introductory video or an introductory post just talking about yourself, your background, your course, and then have students introduce themselves on the discussion board. So this facilitates instructor-to-student interaction, but it also facilitates student-to-student interaction, and it's a really nice and easy way to facilitate or to build some form of community. You may also not know this, but instructors can use the discussion board as a place for students to post reflective journals. So you can set it up in a way that only you and a student can view their individual reflective journal entries. So throughout the semester, students might answer questions that you've posed or reflect on material. And this way you can provide very personalized feedback to each student's journal. Discussion boards are also a great place for students to connect with each other. So you can have a forum dedicated to what's called a student cafe, where students can ask questions to each other or have conversations. It's really an opportunity for them to also share their own types of content with each other if they have an interesting article or if they have an interesting website that they want to share with each other. They might even use it to give each other reminders on due dates, answer questions on assignments, whatnot. It's really just a place for them to be able to connect with their peers. You can also set up a discussion forum specifically for group work. So students within a group will only be able to see their group's discussion forum. So as you can see, in general, discussion boards are really great because they can result in more thought through responses. It gives students a little more time to think about the course content than in a live class. One of my favorite things, probably because I can kind of relate to it when I was a student, is that it may also be a place for the more reserved and quiet students to feel more comfortable asking questions and posting their thoughts versus a face-to-face lecture setting. So we have some recommended practices that we would like to share for discussion boards. Concerning feedback, you might consider very basic feedback practices or more sophisticated. So for basic feedback practices, you can include the setting to allow for upvotes or star ratings on discussion posts, where students can either upvote or rate each other, or you can upvote or rate them. A more sophisticated way to give feedback to your students is to use a rubric with defined criteria. So criteria on what you expect, and then assessing how well they've met the criteria in your rubric. So here's a very basic example of a rubric that might be used for a discussion board. You can create your own criteria and you can decide what constitutes as good or poor posts. You can also link a discussion topic to the grade book in my courses. So if you'd like to use a discussion topic for assessment purposes, that is also possible. Some strategies to increase engagement or increase interaction on your discussion boards can can vary depending on your course. You can create smaller discussion groups shown here, especially if you have a larger class. So it might be easier and a little more intimate for students to discuss in smaller groups versus having hundreds of students posting to one discussion forum. You can also design an activity where interaction is necessary. So for example, you can tell your students that they're required to post at least one post of their own answering your prompt, and then reply to at least one of their peers' posts. You can include the setting that students cannot see their peers' posts until they make their first post. So this might be useful in the context if you're asking a question. You really don't want students to be influenced by their classmates before they post and post their answers or their thoughts to your question. It's also important to consider what question type you're going to use for the prompt. So a better practice is to ask more open-ended questions, or maybe multiple questions that students can choose from. This just avoids having students write very short responses, maybe a yes or no, one word. That doesn't really facilitate any form of further discussion. One last thing you might want to think about is how you're going to manage the communications in your discussion board. So it's a good idea to set expectations for your students. Give students specific directions as to the minimum number of words that are required in their posts, the minimum number of references or examples that you'd like them to give, and what your standards are regarding formality of language. So letting them know, is participation required? How often are you expecting them to post? Are you going to value quality over quantity? Here's an example of a basic set of guidelines that are given to students regarding the discussion board. As you can see, the second guideline is be polite. So this is an example of establishing rules for netiquette. Netiquette in a nutshell is online communication etiquette. So it's important to clarify with your students from the beginning that abusive or offensive communication will not be tolerated in the discussion boards. You can also clarify how you expect students to write, if it's academically or not. You can let them know, like, avoid using emojis or any type of online slang, and ensure that they use proper citations and references. And finally, you might want to consider how your discussion boards will be moderated. So are you going to be moderating the posts yourself? Will you read everything that students post, and will you respond? Will you have your TAs moderate? I've even seen some cases where instructors actually assign student moderators within the class to the discussion board. So as you can see, there are many things to consider and many ways in which you can use the discussion board to promote engagement and interaction, especially in a remote setting. So it might seem very overwhelming, but discussion boards can really provide active and learning social opportunities. Remote learning in particular might feel isolating to students when they can't see their peers or you. So using the discussion board as an opportunity to set up a space for people to connect will help them feel a little less alone in the experience. It's also a unique opportunity for students to process content a little more deeply and ask questions and debate and also share their diverse perspectives.
All right, thank you, Jasmine. That was great. So I know, as Jasmine just said, this probably does seem like a lot of information, and you're probably wondering where to go next. So I have a couple of suggestions for you. And the first is to check out My Courses Essentials, which is a self-paced tutorial created by TLS. It's available to you on My Courses. All instructors should be enrolled. If you're not there, it might be just that there's an overnight batch upload of new instructors. Maybe check the next day. So this is a self-paced course. It includes descriptions of the most commonly used tools in My Courses. It includes recommended practices and links to step-by-step instructions or tutorials for setting up the tools. And you can navigate through it as a full course, or you can just refer to it when you need to, or specific modules that help you in setting up your own course. And then also, moving on to the next slide, we have offered or are going to offer a series of webinars. There's been at least one iteration of each of these webinars. There are a few live sessions left. As you can see, we're in the Promoting Student Interaction and Engagement for Remote Learning. And there are two other webinars that deal directly with the content that we presented today. And the first is Getting Started with Polling at McGill. And the second is Engaging Students Online with Zoom. So if you are interested in learning more about either of those things, I really encourage you to either register to attend a webinar or watch one of the recordings that we have available on our website. All of these things are available, all of these webinars are available on our website now for you to watch at your leisure. I would really encourage you to do that. And now I'd really like to throw open the floor to questions. I've seen a couple come up in the chat as we've been talking, but we want to make sure that you get a chance to ask any lingering queries that you may have. I see Oksana's got one here. I am wondering if there are any plans to update the My Courses discussion board interface. It's not very fluid or intuitive for the type of interactions we're looking for. That one I'm not aware of. I don't know if that's something you know, Jasmine. Sorry to put you on the spot once again. Sorry, you're muted.
All right, I'm muted. Yeah, so TLS isn't the one who would be updating the My Courses discussion boards. It's actually a company called D2L. So it will depend on how they make their updates, but yeah, it's done through the company. Suggestions are welcome. We can always have product enhancement suggestions that we give them and they consider. So that is something possible. There was a question before that I just wanted to address from Jesse. So Adam kind of already touched on it, but I thought I'd talk a little bit more. It was kind of comparing My Courses, I gotta find it here, My Courses discussion boards to Teams. Okay, is it fair to say that Teams is better for student-led collaboration and discussion and My Course is better for instructor-led discussion? So for something like if you were doing group work, for example, I think you can set up a discussion space for students to be able to interact with their group members for group work. However, you're kind of limited to the features that My Courses has on their discussion boards. Teams has a lot more features, including the video conferencing tool. They can call each other. It's just more seamless in the way that they chat. So I think that for something like that, Teams is a little more comprehensive with what it includes for students to interact. And it's also something to note, Adam had already said this, but students cannot set up discussion forums or topics in the discussion board. They can only respond to topics that you have set up as the instructor. So that's important to keep in mind. Yeah.
And I see that Sarah's asked, instead of Zoom, would you recommend Microsoft Teams to conduct a class? And Adam has answered no, I can anticipate why. That's because Zoom is much richer and more robust as a tool for teaching. There are features in Zoom that are not available in Microsoft Teams. I don't believe breakout rooms is available in Microsoft Teams. I mean, Teams is getting better every day, but for the moment, and I think for the foreseeable future, our recommendation remains to use Zoom as a teaching tool.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen, oh wait, here we have one. Can we link Microsoft Teams to the My Courses gradebook?
No, it doesn't connect. Teams is really for students to use for their own group work purposes, so it wouldn't be something that you could connect to My Courses or the gradebook.
Yeah. One question that's come up in another webinar that I thought was a really interesting topic is about whether or not you should ask students to keep their cameras on during a live session. And I know the official word is that we cannot compel students. And while I do agree that having everybody's face visible in a conversation does help with a feeling of community, with a feeling of being connected to others, students' home situations are broad in scope. They may have children, they may have elders they're taking care of. And if they choose to keep their cameras off, I think that's a choice we have to respect. Although all things being equal, it is nice to be able to see everybody. So I thought that was an interesting question that came up in another webinar that we gave in this series, and I thought it'd be interesting to bring it up today. Yeah.
There was one earlier that kind of was answered, but we can talk more about it. Was that, do you recommend student cafes being moderated by the instructor or facilitator? Student cafes are generally a place for students and students only to connect. I mean, you can always take a look and make sure that netiquette practices are being followed. That's always important, just to make sure there's no aggressiveness or what have you. But generally a student cafe would be for students to just talk to each other there. So you wouldn't really have to moderate that type of discussion for them.
Is there a Zoom option to view all participants while screen sharing? So you can see a few of them. I'm not aware of any way to be able to see all of them, especially if you have you know, more than 25 in your class, because I think 25 is probably about as many as you can get on the screen at one time, even when you're not sharing content. Otherwise, you have to scroll through to see all of the faces. No, you can't see everybody. You can scroll through even when you are sharing content to be able to see more faces, but unfortunately, given the numbers that many of you will have in your class, you won't be able to see everybody at once. Yeah, and Adam is just adding to that. If you have two screens, you can show content and a lot of other faces. That's also true. Yeah, when you go to, I can actually maybe just tell you briefly about how I've organized my screen right now. I have two screens, but when you're delivering content, you want to make sure that you are visible to students and you're making, you know, at least some sort of eye contact by looking at the camera. So I prefer to have everything on the screen that has my camera embedded on my laptop screen. I find that's an easier way to make sure that I'm not constantly like this, because that's not nearly as compelling to somebody in a class than somebody who's looking right at the camera. So you can either toggle between screens if you like, or you can set up you know, two applications on the same screen. That's actually what I'm doing right now, so that I can see both my content and I can see all of you.
There's a question about using Facebook. So our students often have a Facebook page similar to a student cafe. Do you recommend we guide them towards these McGill resources? I would say yes, because a Facebook page is an open public platform, and you can't assume that everybody has a Facebook account. If you use the McGill resources like a discussion board or a Teams place for them to connect with each other, you can then at least verify that all students have access to that page. So as the instructor, I think it would be better to guide them towards the McGill resources versus Facebook. It's a very good idea to stay away from Facebook, Adam said.
I'd agree. Yeah, students do seem to like Facebook.
Yeah, they're familiar with it for sure.
Yeah.
But I think on the McGill end, yeah, it would be better to encourage them to use the tools that we have instead.
So Amanda's asked, is there a quick reference that includes tips for setting up your sound, camera for better engagement, framing, eye contact, lighting, etc. So we have plenty of resources available on our website, including some best practices or recommended practices on how you can set yourself up for a Zoom call. I'll just mention a few. You probably want to choose a quieter environment in your home or wherever you happen to be working from, one that doesn't have a lot of background noise or clutter. I mean, I'm not showing a great example today, but I have a very small home. You want to make sure that you're well illuminated. I'm in a dark corner here. I actually have a light above me. Sorry, you can sort of see the edge of it here. And I'm actually just shining it on the wall, and the light is bouncing off the wall so that it lights up my face a little bit better. There's some, common sense things. Like I said, try to make sure that you make eye contact as much as possible with the camera, which is a sort of funny way of putting it, but I guess in these times, that's the eye contact we have to make. Frame yourself pretty well. Like a lot of people have this tendency on Zoom to kind of lean in, and we've actually been talking about this, especially with, parents and people who are maybe less familiar with it, that they're going like this and you're way in on the camera, and that's a bit odd for people on the other end. So, don't feel like you can't move or gesture, but just try to keep within the frame as much as possible. And if you know photography, keep your rule of thirds, so keep in the center.
That just makes me think, makes me think of having to practice and then recording yourself and then rewatching. We've had to rewatch our own webinars, and it's uncomfortable to watch yourself, but that might be a good idea too. So before you give a live lecture and have your setup ready, just do a run through first and record it and then rewatch it and see what's working and what's not.
Yeah, if it's painful, it means you're learning, right? Yeah. Yeah, and also I mentioned it quickly when I was going through my slides, but if you do have somebody with whom you can practice, that's a good idea, just to become more familiar with the tools and to get some feedback from them on what you maybe are doing well or what you could stand to improve. Yeah, I'm not sure I see any other questions at the moment. Just going through the chat here, and this is something that you can do in your own classes too. Stop at intervals to ask for questions or keep them for the end, depending on how you're more comfortable.
I noticed at the beginning of the webinar when you were talking, Erin, there were a lot of questions about Zoom itself. So we really encourage you to either watch the recordings on the Zoom webinar that we already gave or attend the upcoming webinar, which you can register on our website.
Adam, who's moderating the chat today, is actually delivering that webinar, and he's a pro with Zoom. We've actually been using Zoom at TLS for quite a while, pre-pandemic, if you can even believe that. Yeah, so we are pretty familiar and pretty comfortable with Zoom.
Just wanted to jump in and say that there are the Zoom webinar that we do at TLS, the one that you can sign up for, is meant to level yourself up with Zoom. We're anticipating that you have knowledge of Zoom already. If you're interested in a really basics, like just get started, on the links in the chat, you can see to our Zoom page. There's a link on teaching with Zoom, and there's a great 45-minute video or a number of videos from Zoom that go through all the different settings and everything you want to do at a very nice, careful, slow pace. The Zoom session that we offer in the webinar is really meant to level up from that. So it's just to keep that in mind. If you come to that Zoom session where we'll talk about whiteboarding and all sorts of other things that are much more advanced than just the basic settings of how do you control a meeting, what do you do with a meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks, Adam. Yeah. All right, so if there are no more questions, I guess we can close the webinar now. Again, I'd encourage you very strongly, if you have other questions, to look at our website. All of the link to the website is in the chat, and you can find us at mcgill.ca/tls/ maybe if you could put it up again, Adam. I always get mixed up with the exact order of things in that URL. Thank you, Adam. Yeah, so you can find plenty of resources there. My Course is Essential as well is a good way to get started if you have questions about discussion boards or anything else in my courses. If you are interested, if you just want to get a transcript of this chat, now is your chance. You can click on the 3-dot button on your chat screen and download the transcript of the chat from there. But as Adam's mentioned, all of the resources that he's made reference to in this webinar are available on our website underneath the description for this webinar. Thank you so much, everyone. We're all just doing our best, and we'll get through this.
Thank you very much for attending. Have a great day.
Yes, thank you.